President, General Secretary, delegates, sisters and brothers, comrades. Those who know me will know that I'm chuffed to bits to be with one of the greatest unions in our movement and make a small contribution on some of the work that we're doing. I thank you for your hospitality last night and look forward to some more today and in the future. I was given a little badge recently by my union for being active in the union for 40 years. And it set me thinking about a few things about the past and the recent history of our country and our movement. Like most of you and most trade unionists, I started as a lay activist, a volunteer at branch level, became a steward, became a secretary, and then had the privilege from 1987 to 2012 of being the General Secretary of my union and doing my bit to support the workplace shop stewards and the representatives who form the bedrock of the whole trade union movement, which is why it's so great to be at a democratic union like yours, which more than many, I have to say, appreciates the leading role of those on the shop floor and the coalface. And then in 2012, I was elected as the General Secretary of the General Federation of Trade Unions, which has been going since 1899 and has a role, a great role in our history of supporting small and specialist trade unions. As Ian said, I've always loved this union and always worked closely with it, and I've been reflecting on the lasting significance of some of the work that we've done together over the years. And I want to put that in a bit of the context of the new education program that we've got. I think you've got these circulated on your desks. One of the first times I came in contact with the Bakers Union was when, about a minute after the miners declared their strike in 1984, my union and your union declared solidarity. And we gave solidarity to the National Union of Mine Workers during that heroic year in a struggle that was not just against vengeance on the National Union of Mine Workers or trying to stop the whole of the trade union movement, though it was those things. But it was about something much deeper, much more serious. It was about removing energy supply from our country so that it became politically dependent, as the European Union wanted it to do, on others. We could no longer provide our own energy, and inevitably, as the miners said at that time, we'd end up in the situation we're in now, where we can't afford basic energy supplies. It's imported from overseas, and it's owned by those we don't control. And there was a long history also, certainly in my union and my life and with the Bakers, from 1976, of saying that that great plan to keep us in the European Union was not in the interests of workers. We opposed the Maastricht Treaty, we opposed the Tories signing up the Single European Act, we opposed the single currency, we opposed the single European Constitution, and then eventually, after all those decades of saying that the people should have a say, the people had a say, and we decided decisively what was right, an independent country rebuilding and transforming itself and undoing the damage that the vandals in the Tories and the New Labour Party had wreaked on our country. So part of that also was recognising a policy that was deeply ingrained in this union of mine, that you can't allow spivs and speculators and gamblers on the casinos of the money markets to run your economy. It makes me laugh when I hear some of those bankers from the City of London say, well, we're the wealth creators of Britain. They've got it wrong. They don't understand their economics. They don't create any wealth. The only thing those bankers have created is food banks and misery for our people. Like my union, yours has always had an internationalist position. I've seen old friends in the room today with whom we worked many years ago, extending our hand of friendship across the world, despite all the difficulties that we had, to support some countries that had been neglected. And I think of the work that we did on Vietnam. For many of my generation, it was that attempt by the United States of America to, quote, bomb Vietnam into the Stone Age that motivated us to get involved in politics and the trade union movement. And when in those days the Vietnamese wanted some support from the trade unions here, they wanted blood and they wanted bicycles, and we sent it out. But then when they defeated the US, we forgot about them. So the Bakers Union was one of those that was determined to rebuild those links, and it did it successfully. We've had the Vietnamese with us previously, and again this year they'll be coming over because they want to learn a bit more about our health and safety work, and I'm sure that the Bakers Union will be part of that as well. And of course the Bakers Union has been in the leadership of transforming the misfortunes that fell across the Labour Party, and has said quite clearly for many years, and now made it decisive, made it make the change, that if Thatcher said that her greatest creation was Tony Blair, then we'd have to do something about it and change it. That was not the way to go. Now, we've also played a part together in the General Federation of Trade Unions in modernising that organisation to make sure it's fit for purpose for today and for the future. Because when you think about the British trade union movement, it's been a movement over the years since our formation of the first unions in the 1750s of small, specialist trade unions. That's what we are. That's where we've come from. Trade unions, small, not giant general unions, but small trade unions, democratic, responsive, and fighting for their members in their best interests. And the General Federation of Trade Unions tried to support them. And the role of the Bakers Union in the modernisation recently and keeping ourselves fit for purpose for the future has been massively strengthened by the involvement of Ronnie and Sarah Woolley on our executive, and both incidentally on our finance committee, and attending every meeting, and a regular attender at our education officers meetings, John Vickers, and one of our trustees is Andy Morehouse from this union. So we've been trying to make sure that there is a structure for the future of workers who will inevitably grow and prosper and continue to have specialist trade unions in the future. And one of the first things that we started to do was to try and find ways of using the resources of the General Federation of Trade Unions to be of greater benefit for affiliates and not so greatly beneficial to the money markets. Because like many of the unions, since the 90s, the GFTU had started to invest in those casinos that had caused all of our problems. The unions didn't do that probably before the 80s and 90s. They would invest any of their spare cash in building schools and gasworks and investing in local authorities and all the rest of it. We invested in the real economy. But that changed. So we've decided to change it back, to use what investments we have for the benefit of the movement in the old cooperative, mutual way. So many of you know we bought a hotel and conference centre in Leicestershire called Quorn. The idea is very simple. We create the best hotel we can, the best food, the best rooms, and we generate income on the commercial market through that, but also for the unions and their members at discount rates, of course, so that we can put money back into our education trust and provide more education for the unions. And needless to say, when we opened the hotel, first union to recognise Bakers Food and Allied Workers, and it's good that there's a rep from the hotel here today. So have a look if you've not been there. Discounts for you and your families as Bakers Union members to be there. It's something that we can be proud of, and it's something that this union has massively supported. But we haven't just done that to open a hotel. We've done it, as I say, to put money back into our charity to provide more education. And let me say a couple of things about that. Firstly and foremost, our movement has always believed, with Nelson Mandela, who said in 2003 that education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. Now, the other side know that. They probably know it better than us. Look at what they do. They send their little darlings off to the prep schools at the age of 6. They pack them off to the elite public schools. Then they send them off to the elite universities. And they train them in what they call politics, philosophy, and economics, which doesn't really amount to much more than training them to pretend they can speak on every subject with authority when actually they're speaking baloney, and training them the art of arrogance to rule. Now, we've lost track of doing that for our class, for ensuring that our future generations, like the ones that preceded us, believe that as the wealth creators, we need the political and the economic power in society. Some of the guts has been torn out of trade union education. In fact, much of it's not called education anymore, it's called training. And it puts forward the idea that if you learn a few technicalities, you can improve things. But improving things and changing the world in the way that Mandela meant it meant having some imagination, having some knowledge, and sharing that knowledge, and recognizing that knowledge is power and we need more power. The recent history of trade union education has been that much of it has been government funded, and he who pays the piper calls the tune. That's why a lot of the guts has been ripped out of it, but also that funding is starting to disappear. So it's become more important these days that an organisation like the GFTU finds ways of getting funding so that we can improve the quality of education and provide more of it. And that's what we've done in that programme. It's not just the biggest we've ever offered, but it's completely revised. The curriculums have changed and developed. The tutors have changed and developed. We're working with more university experts who want to come back into the trade union movement and help us out. And how we teach and how we learn is going to use some of the most modern techniques and recognise that we're all educators in one way or another. We've all got something to learn from each other. So looking through that programme, you'll see loads of stuff there that you won't have seen before. Let me highlight just a couple of things. There's a big section in the programme on our history. If you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going. And if anyone was to ask me what's the worst thing that's happened to trade unions and to our culture over the last 30 or 40 years, I'd say it's been removing from us that sense of history and where we came from. And it's been deliberately removed. I can remember at primary school, one of the things that got me interested in the trade union movement was when I was 8, and at primary school there was a history book which had a few pages about the kids who used to live in the mines, work in the mines, and go up the chimneys, and it told the tales of what our predecessors had done, not to just get them out of those conditions and fight for health and safety, but fight for schooling and dignity. Now, none of that happens anymore. Trade union and working class education has largely disappeared from the school curriculum. It's largely disappeared from the universities. And sadly, it's largely disappeared from the trade union movement. But we're offering some opportunities to get back to it, because that's where the inspiration comes from. That's where the inspiration to recognise where our real power has been expressed in history and where it can be expressed again today. We all voted last week. We all voted. And we forget too often the fact that we had that right to vote was the product of a massive struggle which really went on for about 134 years. People died, people went to prison, people transported, etc., etc. To recognise that the democracy of the country lies in the hands of the people, not in the hapless few who in the first part of the 19th century could only vote because they had property. So, comrades, it's a great time, as you've registered already politically. It's a great time of hope and optimism and of change, and a recognition that that last 40 years since 79, when Thatcher got in and started the gravy train for the 1% and started the vandalism of our economy and our public services, that our parents' generation had built up at a time when the national debt was 6 times greater than it is today. That 40 years is coming to an end, and we need education, we need the solidarity and the learning that we can get from each other on the GFTU courses more than we've ever needed it before. So let's go back to our start as a movement. Here are some quotes from some of the great figures who started the GFTU and started the trade union movement, largely for unskilled workers in industry. We want to see the necessary economic knowledge imparted in our labour organisations, so that labour in the future shall not be made the shuttlecock of political parties. Our trade unions shall be centres of enlightenment and not merely the meeting place for paying contributions and receiving donations. Our ideal is a cooperative commonwealth. That was 1890. It's relevant today, brothers and sisters, and together we are going to make that cooperative commonwealth. I look forward to your continuing support. Good luck.